Okay, so welcome to the Curriculum Subcommittee meeting. Today is September 29th. We are recording the meeting, so those of you who want to view it at a later time will be able to do so, and just so that everyone knows that it's being recorded. So I wanted to see if people could take a few minutes to review the minutes from June 23rd. We need to approve those minutes, and I was not present at that meeting, so I'm happy to make a motion, but I can't actually vote to approve the minutes. So if people could just take a minute. Helen?
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I don't know where they are.
Okay, let's see.
They were attached to the meeting notice, but I can resend that.
They were?
So it's at the top.
Not the panelist notice, the meeting.
No, the original agenda notice, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Could
the
you
only thing I
resend,
would note
Robin?
is that there were a lot of concerns that were raised in that meeting, and a lot of questions that were raised. So I can go back to my notes and find them, but I think I'm not quite sure what to do about that.
So I really didn't want to push it off till October because it's June minutes. But do you think, are people feeling like they need to make some comments and get some notes to Robin, to like things that maybe need to be added? Or I wasn't at the meeting, so it's just really hard for me to say. I don't know if they're thorough enough or if there's anything missing.
I think it would be fine to wait until the next meeting if Susan wants to make some changes.
Cool.
I'm happy to go through.
I mean, Robin, you always take great notes, and there are always just sometimes I think things that each of us want to, highlight. So that'd be great.
Yeah, no, I think it
No worries.
definitely captures the main points. I think there were just a lot of concerns that were raised specifically that I will look through my notes.
Okay, so Robin, we'll table that to the next one, and we'll put that on the agenda for next time.
And Robin, if you could resend it, that would be really nice if you happen to have it handy.
Okay, perfect. So there are two things. The next thing on the agenda is a discussion of 2020-2021 curriculum subcommittee goals. And I really wanted to hear from folks and have us talk about as a subcommittee, what it is that we hope that this subcommittee will accomplish this year. I have some thoughts, but I'd really love to hear from other folks, and then I can join at the end if there's anyone who wants to start. Barbara?
Well, my problem with it is that when I think about this particular subcommittee, I think about the fact that what we are doing is largely looking at curriculum issues, sometimes ones that come up and sometimes just ones that are always in place. That is to say, every year we have to approve certain things. And I think that when I think about goals, I don't much think about it so much it's not like policy where you have a manual that it's your responsibility, that committee's responsibility to keep that manual up to date. What we're doing on curriculum is looking at the curriculum in the schools, and we can set certain kinds of things about, we could set the bigger goals, we could look at those, but a lot of the work on the curriculum subcommittee is reacting to what we are presented with. That is to say, they have been working on essential curriculum. We have not looked at that yet. That's something we need to do. I'm not certain, in my mind, that's a goal. So I'm a little bit unclear about the role, the kinds of goals we should be setting here.
So I think that there is some differentiation between the times when issues come up and then also things that we need to approve that are part of our regular process. And so I think what I was intending by goals are a framework to guide our work this year. And I think that things will come up, but I think it's also good to sort of have a list of things. So they may be different than what we consider school committee wide goals, although I think that some of the work we do in curriculum subcommittee will assist and support the larger school committee goals that we have not yet settled on. And I think that that framework would be including things like a review of the essential curriculum. So I guess I'll throw out some things that I was thinking would be on this list. So I have had, well, we briefly talked with Hal at a previous school committee meeting, just in having him come and talk to us about what the high school curriculum looks like going forward this year, because there have been changes to the schedule and changes to the curriculum. I've talked with Michelle and Meg about, because they are sort of the fifth floor contacts for the curriculum subcommittee, about what curriculum looks like and whether or not that's the essential curriculum or the curriculum adjustments for this year. I think those are two really big pieces, and because they're handled by different people, they probably need to be different meetings. We could talk about the essential curriculum. I think there's some conversation about the math review that's been ongoing that I think we should put on our calendar as something we need to circle back to. We had talked not extensively, we had talked last year several times about initiating a middle school review. I'm not saying that I think that that's something we can do in the middle of this, but these are sort of a list of goals of things that we hope to address over the course of the year, whether or not it's doing it extensively or just making a plan for it going forward. Another thing that I thought we need to talk about or put on our list is what we want to do about the SIPs, only because we haven't talked about that at the school committee level, and that's something that curriculum has done in the past. And so what is the role? What are our goals for that work? And so I guess in a way I'm thinking about them as in goals for ourselves as a subcommittee and a framework for what kinds of things we think we want to address this year. Another thing I'd like to put on there, and I think this is definitely a spring thing if we get to it, is talking about differentiation. Because when we talk about an essential curriculum and we talk about consistency in the curriculum, which we're hearing a lot about, I think that educators, professional development and ability to differentiate is huge. And so I think that that may be something that we want to talk with our district level peers to sort of talk about what that looks like and how we can support teachers. Does that help, Barbara?
Well, those are exactly the things that we should be doing this year. My issue was around, are they goals or are they chores that we want to accomplish? So it's just a difference in how we're looking at it. But I think all of those things absolutely need to be done this year. And there may be other things. As we begin to move into this much more computer-oriented learning. I know we were doing it last spring, but that was not something that people had planned for. I think we need to keep that in our mind at all times. How is this working? Is it working well? I see our role as an advisory role as much as anything to the people who are working on curriculum in the schools. We're not talking about teachers, but we're talking about the senior staff that's working on curriculum. We're a sounding board. And I think that's a big piece of what we should do, because we are representative of the public. And we need to make sure that what the school committee is doing in terms of curriculum is what we think we, the public, should be doing. And also hearing what the public has to say. We began to get more attendance at our curriculum meetings last year, which I think was a good thing. I don't know at this point in time whether that will continue, but I hope it does. So I think it's just semantic, what we're saying.
Susan?
Yeah, so it strikes me that, this year we've essentially opened a 9th elementary school with a completely different pedagogical model. And so understanding that pedagogical model for the RLA is really important. So it's not so much about being we literally don't understand. We have to understand what it is. I think the second thing is that in terms of the hybrid model, we have not really had a robust discussion about the pedagogical model for the hybrid model. We have not had a robust discussion about the plus, like what plus means. We haven't talked about the PD or the competencies needed to be able to operate in this environment, like what competencies our staff need, nor the PD that we are, kind of supporting to do that, both teacher-to-teacher PD and district-provided PD. We haven't really talked about the, ed tech resources, which comes to this committee that are needed. And I don't necessarily mean like count computers, but even just directionally, we have not given strategic direction for the ed tech needs in this environment. And we also have not had a, sort of robust discussion about supports for struggling families over and above sort of the minimum. And so I think there's just a variety of things that are tied directly to the fact that education is very different this year. Not to mention the fact that if folks had, a third of the year last year was, to some extent sort of gone, not just for Brookline, but for many people, as a third of the year in instruction. And this year is not, I don't think anybody thinks in the Commonwealth or in the country that we're going to get a full year instruction this year. And so I think there are just long-term ramifications for that, for different sets of students that we have to understand and grapple with. So I think that there's a lot really about the pedagogical pieces that we're wrestling with. And I think, again, there is a BHS component to it. There's a schedule component to it. There's a, differentiation component to it. But I think if I were to think about like, what are the big strategic decisions, like this committee has to give guidance to the finance subcommittee about priorities, because we can't talk about pedagogical priorities in finance. We have too much going on. And this is really the committee that has to do that. Similarly, if we're not going to do special education in this committee, we probably do have to have a separate special education conversation, only because special education normally gets one meeting a year in the curriculum subcommittee, and that's basically the approach from the school committee's perspective. There's so much going on right now that either we amp that up here or do something else. So at any rate, that's my list.
So I'll just sort of listening to both of you talk, and specifically Susan, some of the things you mentioned. I had been trying to coordinate with Michelle Herman and Meg Massini to be able to come to the September meeting and talk about some of this pedagogical stuff, and they're just not able. They're just not in a spot where they were able to come to the meeting today to talk about that. And so the goal is hopefully, I think that you're right. These are big idea things. And so I'm hoping that they will be able to come in October, either them or Hal or both, to talk about what it looks like at the high school. And I will speak only for myself about the special ed piece. I think that piece of work is really important, and probably not, I don't know that we'll be able to do all of this work about the list of things we just created that I've written down that we're talking about, and do that work. I think that we may need a separate committee for special education. I just think there's too much work, and that would get, if we're talking about like, what does RLA look like? What does the hybrid look like? What is remote plus? What are the PD, ed tech, all of that stuff, like that's gonna take us many meetings to get through. And that means that like, when would special ed fit into that? So my feeling is we may need some other avenue for those discussions. Helen, did you wanna share?
So all of these are great topics and what we really, what the committee needs to do. But it seems to me I'm thinking about what Susan's been saying and dealing with the issues of pedagogy that the pandemic has brought up is probably the first and foremost area we should deal with. One thought I had as Susan was talking in terms of kids who have lost out on a half a year or more, we should be planning now for next summer and making sure we have money in the budget for next summer when hopefully somebody willing, this will be somewhat over, and maybe we can do a month of schooling, for different groups of kids. Or for all kids. Maybe we think about, I don't know. We need to think about it in ways, be creative, you know, and thinking about how we might want to do this. Maybe we take off the month of December and add a month in June. You know, it'd be negotiations. I'm sorry, Suzanne, but maybe that makes sense, you know? When we could get possibly everybody back in with the extra teachers we have, we could do a lot in that time framework, possibly. So, I mean, those are the sorts of things that I would like us to concentrate on, because I don't think much else will happen. I do think we need to know about math and what's happening with that, because it's something we started in. But the rest is huge discussions that I don't think there's the bandwidth right now.
Barbara?
What Helen is saying made me think about the fact that one of the things that might be useful for us to do, just for our own understanding, is look around for somebody who has a great deal of expertise in and the psychological issues of child development, because I think one of the things that we are going to face for the next few years in our schools is due to the fact that these children have had such disrupted education. And what are the ramifications of that? What should we keep our eyes at? What should our teachers be keeping their eyes out for in terms of child behavior or parent behavior? What can we as a system do to help children in terms of social emotional skills, not just academic skills? Because I think that the social emotional piece is going to suffer, I don't know, I shouldn't say equally with the academic piece, but in some kids it may be worse, some kids it may be less. But I think I would be interested in listening to somebody who is an authority on this kind of thing, to see what we as a school system should be doing to help that be not as bad as it might be.
Does anyone have anything else that they want to add on to, you know, goals or priorities for this year at this time?
And the only other thing that would normally, in a normal year, come to this group is, given that there are different staffing and leadership roles for teaching and learning, there's been a lot of change there. I think having a discussion about that, because it is the school committee's purview to decide what positions and how many of those positions should exist. Obviously, it's a fluid moment where everyone's doing everything, and Jim is sort of assigning people as needed. But I think as we think about steady state, if there are long-term changes, then we need to be able to advocate for those. So, for example, we don't have a really outstanding, you know, deep in the trenches education technology pedagogy person who can work with principals, work with coordinators. We don't have, and there's a lot of pieces that we don't have in the puzzle that people are trying their very, very best to fill in on. But I think to the extent that we think that there are changes needed in the leadership or additions, I guess not changes so much, but additions or positions and capabilities, we need to, again, be clear about that and then obviously advocate for it.
So I think that, hi, Michelle, welcome. I think that my next question is, based on the scope of the work that we would like to hear more about, specifically the pedagogical stuff around, you know, RLA, what hybrid looks like, you know, the PD, all of these pieces that we're talking about. What is curriculum going to look like? What will the curriculum look like for students this year in the hybrid or RLA model, the high school? How frequently do you think we should be meeting? So that's my question, because right now, typically subcommittees are once a month. Is it the feeling of this subcommittee that we need to meet more frequently this fall? Just because one of the other pieces here on the agenda is our meeting schedule. And I know it's been tricky to get everyone's schedules aligned. Helen Charlowski has been so lovely in helping me navigate a time that will work. And so she and I are going to try to coordinate Tuesdays so that everyone is free and not sort of doing back-to-back meetings. So I guess my question for everyone is, what do you think is an appropriate frequency of meetings? At least for the fall.
Well, I'm new in this role and still just with the RLA getting up and running and probably just starting this week. So I am happy to work with you as often as you feel needed right now to have the information you need from the district side.
I mean, is once a month enough, or do we try to schedule twice a month through December and see what we can get? Is that too much? I don't know. And the other piece of that is, I'm so glad that Michelle's here, because part of it is our, availability to meet, but also, district personnel being available to meet with us and give us these reports. So, I'm very hopeful that things have started to be underway, and that we may have more access to district staff to come and give us this information and to talk through these big ideas with us about the changes. Barbara?
Part of what bothers me about meeting more often is that is going to put more pressure on the staff. And I understand that Michelle is willing, but I'm not certain at this particular point in time we should be adding to it. I think we should keep it once a month for at least, I think we should reconsider the question once we have our kids in school and things have settled down a little bit. I hate to ask the staff, and the staff is essential to this committee really, to do any more than they're doing right now. And it could be something we reconsider a little bit later.
So I hear you, Helen. I mean, I hear you, Barbara. I'm thinking, I am wondering if in October we should try to schedule 2 meetings. I just feel like there's so much information, and we could decide what we think is an appropriate amount of time on each one. But just thinking about getting sort of an update on like the RLA model as a model, the hybrid model as a model, and then maybe, I don't know if we can do both. I'm hesitant to schedule both of them on the same day because I think they're massive, and I think we could spend the whole amount of time on each one of those, and then perhaps we could schedule an earlier November meeting and ask Hal to come in from the high school, or Anthony, or whoever else they want, staff thinks is appropriate to bring in to talk about curriculum changes and adjustments at the high school level. I just don't, if we do once a month, then we're not getting some of this really important information until really too late. So I'd love to hear some feedback on what people think about those ideas.
Well, I agree with you, Jennifer. I do think we need more, especially in the beginning. We may decide later on that we can go to once a month, but I think the Remote Learning Academy can include the high school, and the hybrid can include the high school too. We just need to do it, make sure we give enough time to the high school, or we can do it separately. I mean, I'm willing to do either. I think getting our arms around and explaining to people also in the community about what's happening and why it's happening the way it is will be a critical piece. And so the more we get that out there, I think that's for the better.
Susan, do you want to add anything to that?
I guess what I would say is it's really important to make sure we understand what we're talking about, because we could spend a full day talking about each one of these things. And so I think understanding what information we need and why we need it and what decisions we have to make is very important. Otherwise, we will ramble on and talk about all kinds of things, and we won't ever, we'll sort of, oh, one interesting thing that occurred to me, and that we'll get nowhere. Like, we won't even feel like we've scratched the surface after an hour and a half. And so I think there just has to be a succinct sort of explanation about what is it that what's the information that the committee needs, and then be able to sort of show that as succinctly as possible. And then to the extent that there are questions about resources or about the model, again, just to kind of keep us on track and make sure that we don't wander around too much, just have a set of a reason why we're having the conversation. So for me, it's about sort of the level of rigor, and it's about the resources needed to make these things happen. And sort of, if we did all these things, would it meet our, the first one being like, if we did all these things, would it meet our objectives for kids? And then the second is, or are there more things we need to be doing, fewer things we need to be doing, sort of priorities, and then sort of the staffing and capabilities and budget piece. And the latter is directly clear. The former we could spend a lot of time on, but I guess I would just want us to be focused, and so that we're using staff time well.
So can I then maybe reframe? I heard everybody kind of chunk it up into like remote, hybrid, in-person instruction. And maybe if the umbrella were just the instruction, and so, and to your point, Susan, the objectives for kids and what we want students to be doing and be meeting, and that that should be happening. It doesn't matter what model we're in, and so whatever model we're in at the time of discussion, it clearly would be coming from that standpoint. But if we keep it in instruction, and Jen, you also talked a little bit about like this year versus next year, and clearly we do have work to do on like this year's curriculum versus next year's, because it's going to be different. It has to be, just even if the research supports it.
Yeah, I would just say that the mode of pedagogy is so integrally tied to the instruction piece that I think how we teach, we know how we teach in person. What we don't know is how we teach remote. We don't know what plus means. We don't know how we teach hybrid. Like, there are actual pieces of the model, as Jen was saying, that I think we have to wrap our heads around, and like to make sure that we are understanding that, and how will the education get delivered. And then what is it that, I mean, even things like, is it better to have 5 days of synchronous remote instruction, or is it better to have 2 days of synchronous synchronous in-person instruction and 3 days of remote asynchronous or partially synchronous? I mean, even that is a very complicated strategic question for us. That's why I'm saying it is about the model. It's about how it's happening. It's not just so if that's what you meant by instruction, I totally agree. But I think that how matters.
So of these three sort of chunked out pieces, the RLA, hybrid, Helen suggested incorporating the high school into sort of the remote piece, and the high school into the hybrid piece. And then we have sort of the plus piece. Is there an order that you think, did you want to clarify, Helen?
Yeah, because I don't think I mean, it could be done either way with the high school. I just don't want to get a bit short shrift. I think we have not discussed the high school to the level that, assuming they're doing the right thing. I think that's part of it, but we still need to hear what it is they're doing and how they're going about doing it. So I'm happy to do the high school by itself too, whatever makes more sense.
So we've got RLA, the hybrid, the plus piece, and the high school. And I think those are the biggest pieces right now. I think those are our priorities. If someone disagrees, please speak up. But I think those are our 4 pieces. Helen?
Let me possibly add a 5th, and I'm willing to say, no, we don't need to. But I'd like to understand how the in-person is working, and if it's substantially different from what it has been. Is it better or worse? I mean, sort of a little bit of a update, and this doesn't have to be a long one, on how kindergarten's working, how BEEP's working, just so that we know, that what we think we're doing is what's happening.
So I would suggest maybe putting that, like front loading that before we discuss the hybrid, and sort of doing an update on how in-person is doing as a segue into hybrid, because that's sort of the model. So that would be my recommendation. So of these 4 things, if we say we have RLA, hybrid, the plus model, and the high school, I'm thinking of like an early October and a mid-October meeting based around Helen's schedules on Tuesdays, if that works for folks. Which of these would we like to request from staff first?
I think we've done the very least on high school and sort of the second least on the actual pedagogy of the RLA. We've done a lot on the moving pieces of the RLA, but we haven't done as much on the pedagogy of it. So I think that, and because for now everyone is remote, I would hope that, not everyone, but most people are remote, I would hope that that piece is applicable to the most number of children.
Do you think that, and I'm asking, this is a sort of a bigger question is like, do you think that both of those can be done in one meeting? Like my inclination is to say no. Okay, so.
I mean, unless we gave them 90 minutes each and we had a 3-hour meeting, we've done that before.
Is that the will of the subcommittee to do 2 1.5-hour meetings in one night, or would you prefer shorter meetings and more frequency?
I'll do it either way. I think if it's hard to schedule, I mean, honestly, the way it's played out in the past is what was easier. If we could schedule people, we would tend to, you know, do more. But I would say if it's hard to get people, once people give up an evening, they've given up an evening. You may as well stay. Is different from no, I'd rather do, you know, some hour chunks or 1.5-hour chunks, not 3-hour chunks. I think it's, and I can do either.
Helen, Barbara, what do you think?
I think Susan's right. I'm sorry, Barbara, do you want to
Yeah,
talk?
muted. I can do either one.
I mean, I'm also able to do, I just feel like I'm able to do either model, and I just feel such a sense of urgency to get these things discussed, and we're having a hard time, you know, getting that. We have such full agendas, and I think this is a great place for us to talk about these things. So I guess my recommendation would be to do, to find a date, to coordinate with Helen, and I'd like to sort of set that now, like in this meeting.
I can tell you right now, the only curriculum subcommittee meeting that's on a Tuesday,
You mean capital, right?
excuse me,
No,
thank
I'm just checking. I knew that's what you meant.
I'm looking here, I'm reading capital from my screen here and saying curriculum. Wait a minute. I think we're supposed to have one on the 13th.
I think you're scheduled the 13th, 4 to 6.
Thank you so much. It's not on my schedule, but yes, 13th, 4 to 6. So that's the only one that's on a Tuesday right now. So, and it's the second Tuesday of the month. So the first, third, and fourth Tuesdays are open. If you want to stick to Tuesday, if that works for people. I think Susan needed Tuesday, right?
I think her schedule is the most open, and that way she doesn't have to have back-to-backs.
Yeah.
And I'm free, and I think Barbara had said she was free. So if, as long as we can coordinate around capital and make that
Well,
work.
like I said, it's
Yeah.
only the second Tuesday of the month. So.
Okay, so the next Tuesday would be October 6th, and I think that I would like to, I'm gonna just throw this out there and please give feedback. I'd like to see if we could do a meeting from 4 to 7 on the 6th and do half of the meeting with the high school and the other half on RLA. And
Would you say that the times again? 4 to
7, I think we would split it and do, I know it's a long, that's a really, maybe it's too long for folks, and you can give feedback. This is just an idea, but I really just feel like there's so much to talk about and get feedback on, to do. You know, we could decide if we want to do high school in the first hour and a half and then RLA at the end. We could say we could do 4 to 6:30 and see how it goes. Please give feedback.
Just one thing, actually, Robin just mentioned to me, but I don't think it's critical. One of the panels meets on Tuesdays from 4 to 6. Is that correct, Susan?
I think they're redoing, yes, they did over the summer. I don't know, they have not set, I don't think, their schedule going forward, but I can ping them just to check.
Yeah.
Okay.
I am not thrilled with the second Tuesday. What is it? What did you say? The
The
first?
second Tuesday is the capital. So
Right,
it's-
because, yeah. And the first Tuesday, I have something from 3 to 4.
So you'd be going from every Tuesday, every first Tuesday, or just that first
I
Tuesday?
think it's every first Tuesday. Well, that one doesn't say it. Maybe not.
Well, maybe we start
Oh,
at 4:30.
I thought I had put these things in here, but I didn't see it. Anyway, suppose I haven't put everything in here.
Well, I wouldn't want to make a 3-hour meeting a regular thing. I just feel like there's so much that people want information, and this is one vehicle for people to get information and for us to really understand what's happening in our schools. What do you think you would be comfortable with, Barbara, on that October 6th date?
Well, I can do it. It's, you know, there have been plenty of times at school committee I have been on the computer on Zoom that long, so.
Are you sure? I don't want to.
It'll be fine.
Wait,
I
are we
don't-
at- For next Tuesday, October 6th?
Make it for, if we can just set up one. There's something upstairs I have to check. I thought I'd put stuff in, but if it's every Tuesday, every first Tuesday, I might not be happy.
Oh yeah, I was thinking for a regular meeting, maybe we would try the 3rd Tuesday of the month as a regular meeting after Helen's a little bit later. I'm just trying to get in to schedule some things for October, just to get in what we can. So I think I was thinking that the 1st Tuesday of this particular month, we would try to do the high school and RLA, and then try to meet October 20th for a shorter meeting, say from like 4 to 5:30, and try to do maybe the hybrid model. I don't know if we can do the hybrid and the plus. I'm not sure. I guess I am hoping that we are going to get a lot more information on the plus model sooner rather than later at full school committee as part of the updates. And that we won't have to wait until October 20th to get that information, but we could put it on the agenda in case it doesn't come up at full school committee. So can you give me some feedback on October 6th from 4 to 7, half on the high school, half on RLA, and then an October 20th meeting from 4 to 5:30 on the hybrid model and possibly the plus. Thoughts? Oh, Helen, could you
Hybrid being both elementary and high school, or just elementary?
I guess, I guess I'm thinking we could maybe get some feedback when we talk about the high school on the first meeting, if they want to come back and sort of weigh in on what a hybrid model might look like, or they may be still in the planning stages for that and not yet prepared to do that. And then maybe that's a November meeting if they're not prepared. They may not just be ready with that pedagogical model and scheduling because of the work they're working on. Maybe they are. I certainly wouldn't want to speak for them, but we could try to include that and ask them if they want to talk about it during their high school section or if they want to wait and come back. Thoughts?
I would actually rather have 2 shorter meetings than 1 longer meeting. That's right over the dinner hour. And I'm going to be in a meeting. Well, no, that's not the second one, but I don't know. I think that's a long time.
The 4 to 7, is that what you're saying, Barbara?
7, yeah. I think the 4 to 7 is a long time.
It is. I wouldn't want to do that normally. I think that maybe, if I heard correctly, Susan and Helen were also saying that sometimes it's been easier to get staff to sort of dedicate one night to come and do the meeting back to back. Maybe I misunderstood. I think if we do that, we're going to have to split it into 3 meetings, and it'll be a high school meeting, an RLA, and a hybrid, which means that we're bumping into November to get some of this information from the district. That's my only concern.
Well, you're also asking the staff to spend an extra 3 hours to an already long day. So
That's true.
an extra 2 hours because they probably don't leave until 5. I don't know. Go ahead and do what you feel best with, you know.
Well,
Can I just ask for clarity on the topics for a second? Just
Yep.
when you say RLA, I heard you say both the actual academy and remote learning. Are you looking for like a generalized like remote learning in the district, or are you looking specific to the remote learning academy?
so I think that the conversations will depend on where the district is at the point that we have the meetings, because we should be moving quickly to a hybrid model. So
Right.
I think in my thought, I was thinking that it would be very helpful for folks to know what is the current model at the high school and what are the plans? What is the remote learning academy? How is it operating? Is it,
Yep.
so I guess I'm sort of looking here. I was making a list of things I agree with Susan that we really want to be focused. What I don't want, and I think Susan will understand this and probably other members of school committee, I don't want to have 20 meetings on food service. I don't want to have 20 meetings on RLA. So for the, I want us to be focused, and I want us to like really have an idea of like, what is this going to be about? And perhaps people send us a slideshow or whatever it is and some information ahead so that we can come prepared with questions about that. And so I think the things that we're wondering about, and this is sort of, once we sort of decide on the dates, I'd like us to sort of just refine what it is that we're asking staff to give us so that we can be really clear. So if the committee, and I also see Suzanne and David are on here, and I want to give you an opportunity to sort of weigh in on this just as school committee members, because this is greater school committee work. Are folks okay with an October 6th, 4 to 7, and an October 20th, 4 to 5:30? And Michelle, please weigh in as staff. I don't want to burden people, but I also know that we really need to get this information.
I think the other piece that we really, really need is we need staffing numbers for town meeting. We need to be able to explain to people what the financial ask is, and working backwards from that, so what do we need to present? We need to present a budget. How do we get a budget? We need to understand the staffing model. How do we get to the staffing model? We have to understand the pedagogical model. And again, like we know how to do an in-person model with one teacher at the front of the classroom and 19 to 24 kids, but like the ratios are all different. The staffing is very different. And so, and I think that the capacities that we don't have are different. And so unless we can sort of see that holistic picture and say, yes, that is our vision, to support teachers and support the students, then we're not going to be able to cost it out, and then we're not going to be able to ask for it. So there are dominoes here, and so I just want to underscore your sense of urgency, Jen. Not that everything's going to be perfect, but we just need to be able to, if we don't do this, I think we'll be in a very tough spot trying to, make comments and arguments about resources.
The other thing I would add to that, Michelle, is that, part of our planning and understanding the pedagogical models, the implications for budgeting, staffing, and particularly I'm thinking like ed tech right now, our budget cycle, right, starts in the fall. So in knowing there, I think one of the things that would be interesting to sort of hear from staff when we get this information is what pieces from what we do now do we think that are working really well and are effective, and what would we want to carry forward, and what do we need to carry forward for next year's budgeting and planning? So these ed tech pieces that we need to cost out, whether it's saying like we're going to get memberships for Edpuzzle, and we need to buy this software, and we need to hire a person to manage all of this, and whatever those pieces are, we need to understand that so that we can advocate in the budgeting process for those things to be put there. So I think that it's helpful for understanding where we're at, but also helpful for this piece about budgeting. And I think that process, if my memory serves me correctly, is a November start. And so if we wait until November, December, January to have these conversations, we're way too late. And that's why I really am not a fan, of asking staff or asking school committee members to stay for a 3-hour meeting. I just think we have to front load some of our work this year.
I'm totally good on that. My only question, and this is just more about like not having sat consistently on the subcommittee last year, is what overlaps with like the regular general school committee meetings versus the work of this group. So I'm just trying to tease out in my head, like, if we ask like RLA to come and, we have their staff come and do a presentation here, are they suddenly asked to do the same presentation for the general school committee or no? So that's all I'm trying to tease out, but I'm good with anything.
So my
Yeah.
goal, that's a great question. And that's something I think a number of us have brought up. And that's one of my goals for school committee in general, is that the work we do in subcommittee should be supporting the work of school committee. And often things come to subcommittee to sort of get, to really go in depth about, and then we may make recommendations on various committees, right, to the whole school committee. And so I would offer this space as a place for us to discuss things that we have not yet had the opportunity to get on the school committee, agenda, full school committee. And we could set these as goals for these dates. And if staff are going, my thought would be if staff are going to make a presentation to full school committee, I don't want us to also do that here. I do not want us doing double the work. And so this is something I think all school committee members need to know about, but if it may not make it there, right, on that agenda. And so I think that we can I would see this as an expediting process and a way for us to have involved conversations. Maybe other school subcommittee members feel differently, and I would welcome their comment, but I certainly do not want to repeat them. In fact, my inclination is that presentations that are made, I would prefer presentations be sent in advance so subcommittee members or committee members can review them, and that really the time we spend together is in conversation about our questions, instead of being given a presentation that takes 45 minutes and then we only have a small amount of time to discuss it. So I really want to expedite, I really want to make it more efficient. And so, I just want us to sort of think about how we can move beyond like the hour presentations, which there are times, and to this point, there are times when I think it's really, and this is my own personal opinion, times when it's really important for the presentations to be done in live time. For example, last year we had a lovely presentation from the high school about changes to the ways that they wanted to structure, 9th grade course or something like that, or an addition of a new course. And staff members came, and it's more compelling and easier to understand and ask live time. Those are more like conversations than a presentation. When we get like results of data, I think those kinds of things can be put in a presentation, and then we can ask questions. So I'm not really sure where these staff presentations will fall, but I would just encourage whatever we can get ahead of time will help us shorten our meetings overall and make the time we do meet together more productive. Do any other subcommittee members want to? Barbara?
One of the difficulties is that these are topics that the entire school committee is going to need to talk about. And I am not saying that we shouldn't be talking about them at curriculum, but when you talk at curriculum and you have 3 or 4 of the people at that meeting and nobody else is there, then it's probably going to be inevitable that you are going to sit through that presentation again. And I'm just passing that out because I heard earlier, not in this meeting, someone say, let's cut out the presentations twice. I don't see how you can do it unless all of the people who are interested in the subject can come, and it is likely that they won't be able to. So I don't know how you deal with that. It's a bit of a conundrum.
Yeah, I hear you, Barbara. And I guess what I would say to that, I have sort of 2 thoughts on that. Like, one, we can use this curriculum subcommittee to address things before they get to the full committee. They are recorded if people are able to do that. And if they're not, I mean, on some level, I would hope we would get a presentation, ask lots of questions, and that presentation shouldn't be the same the next time. It should be addressing those, like keeping the core components that everyone needs to know, and then addressing the questions that we had to clarify that, and that's the presentation we get, that's the follow-up, and that's what we're all gonna wanna hear anyways. Even if we heard the first presentation, we wanna know what are the developments, what has changed, what has been clarified as a result of the conversations that we have at the subcommittee level. Does that make sense? Are there any other thoughts about, I'd like to really sort of solidify these meeting dates, at least for October, and see if we can get a commitment to meet monthly thereafter on the 3rd Tuesday of the month from 4 to 5:30. Are there any objections to that schedule? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to invite David and Suzanne just to make any comments before we move on with sort of solidifying what exactly we're asking staff to do. Do either of you want to make comment?
I'll just say I'm very supportive of this notion of having specialized meetings that really focus in a substantive manner and then have the questions addressed when information's been provided. Effective strategy, even if it means longer meetings. Longer meetings that are productive are different from lots of meetings that are more spinning our wheels.
I would just add, the high school have a lot to tell you. They are spending Hal and Anthony are spending a lot of time in negotiations. So I don't know what their schedule looks like, as is Michelle.
That was my other concern, is being able to be here versus negotiations.
Yeah, negotiations just is eating up so much time. So that's all just be sensitive at the high school. Maybe they could send somebody else or but they are in negotiations for hours at a time, and they are contributing. I mean, it's really helpful to have them there, I have to say.
So perhaps if it's the will of the subcommittee, I would reach out to the high school and see if the October 6th or the October 20th date would be better for them, to be mindful of that. And then, perhaps we move the hybrid up or the RLA if they can't make, I don't know. Anybody have any thoughts on how we can? I really want to be respectful of everyone's time. And I know, it was really hard. Like, I had wanted to do some of this in September, and we're just in some ways not able to do that because of the workload. Does anyone have any suggestions of the most respectful way to go forward with this?
I would say hold the high school till the 20th, because my guess is that we're going to get holds for negotiations for Tuesday the 6th, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I guess this is really more of a statement and but not, you don't need to answer it, Suzanne and David, but just being thoughtful about the time that is getting spent in negotiations and making sure that every one of those hours is right and is the right way to be asking them to spend their time. I don't know, I don't have an opinion on that one way or the other, but if it's a tremendous amount of time, sometimes you just hit diminishing returns having people there. So at any rate, I would just sort of suggest that whatever that I think this is actually a really important meeting, and I might essentially prioritize this one over one more hour in negotiations, because this does have such a direct flight path to a budget discussion that's happening like in November. So I don't want to take away anything from the importance of negotiations. I would just say, thinking about an incremental hour or two, where to place it, where to ask for it. I would just, that's the question I would ask.
So I think that when I send the email, when I reach out to the high school, I will ask them if they feel that they are able to come to the 6th, because we'd really like to talk with them. And I know I did Hal and I had been emailing, and I said, we're not gonna do it in September because it's very busy right now, and we'll try to do October. So it's on his radar, just not a date. And if they feel like that's gonna put an undue burden or stress on them, we can go to the 20th. I'd rather do the 6th if we can, but any objections to that line of reasoning? Okay, so we're set, Robin. I'm just confirming it out. October 6th, we're gonna meet from 4 to 7. And we will try to put those June 23rd minutes back on for that meeting, if people can take a look at that. We will plan to talk about the high school and the remote learning academy specifically. And then on October 20th, we will meet from 4 to 5:30, and we will be talking about the hybrid pedagogical model and plans, and possibly the plus, if we haven't gotten to that already, in a full school committee meeting. And then our plan going forward will be to meet monthly on the 3rd Tuesday from 4 to 5:30, barring any, and we'll send out, maybe Robin and I can coordinate sending out a list of what those dates are and looking for any conflicts. And if perhaps it's a holiday or something, we need to change it, looking at another, maybe the 4th Tuesday or something like that. So the next thing that I think that we need to do before we finish is just to be really specific about what it is that we are asking the hybrid and the RLA to, and I guess at some point hybrid, and I would say let's focus on the high school unless we think these things fall into all the categories. What is it we are asking staff to tell us? What information do we want or need, and what are we expecting? so that they can have a really focused presentation for us. So I think that for the high school, we wanted to understand sort of what their pedagogical model is for right now, what their plans are on a timeline for hybrid, move to hybrid, what their staffing model is, and any sort of budgetary implications going forward. Susan, is there, or Helen or Barbara, is there anything we want to move to? Perhaps we say, you know, we might ask them what are the important changes to curriculum that we need to know, if there are courses that have been cut or condensed or not running.
Or you could add to that, I mean, some of the math courses are so, you know, chronological that, you know, if students missed out on some of that in the fall, how are they making up for those areas? And whether it's give math as the example, because that's the one that comes to my head. But there may be others where, you know, what is the plan to help kids to get to the level of learning that we would have expected had there not been a pandemic?
Does anyone want to add to that?
Yeah, they may, I mean, I'm not sure if how much thought they've given to that question. So I want to make sure that we ask them questions. I mean, I think it's a good one to tee up for them. Obviously, I think it's an important question, but if they haven't given a lot of thought to that, I think the line between how is it that just on a week-to-week basis, they're planning to get either 100% of the content, I mean, again, AP classes come to mind, or some percentage of the content in, and then how are we supporting sort of educators to be able to do that in a hybrid / in-person, you know, kind of in a remote and in-person environment? Are they teaching at the same time? Are they teaching at different times? What does class size look like? I mean, I just think there's a lot to understand about, like, literally how are they thinking about this year? And then I think just what are the additional, you know, what are the needs that they have identified to be able to pull it off? And I think it's social emotional. I think it's academic support. I think it's just plain old, you know, class size stuff. There's technology. I mean, I can make up a bunch of things that they might need, but I don't want to guess. But I think giving them those kinds of prompts so that they know kind of what to bring to us.
And one other area has to do with the ninth graders coming in that are, I would imagine, at a different point than ninth graders usually are when they come into the high school. And there has to be some adjustment that's being made there. I don't know if we want to have them speak to that or not. Maybe
I think the same thing is probably true on the other side. I mean, I don't have an upperclassman, but kind of, you know, college supports as well. You know, as students enter the window for college, how are we kind of thinking about, again, rigor there? I think it's probably important to be able to explain.
And helping kids right now. I mean, we've had 3 weeks of school, and usually you're getting together your college applications, your you know, what's happening in guidance.
Barbara, did you want to add on?
Yes, I did. I am interested in how the students are doing, how they are doing academically, and how they are doing socially and emotionally, and how are they dealing with these issues as well. I think that, to me, this is one of the really important pieces, the social emotional learning of these kids after they have not been in school for quite a long time.
So I think
I
that
think there's probably another set of things, which is how are they thinking about maintaining the rigor of, for example, science labs in a distance environment, of art, you know, ceramics, or anything that requires media, any of the dance things. I think there's a whole set of things around music, because DESE has given very restrictive guidance about performance. So I think there are just also some special cases at the high school that we haven't necessarily had to deal with in the K-8, but just how they're thinking about that is probably important.
so this is quite a list. So I'm just, and they, you know, I think that some of the things that folks are talking about, specifically how students are doing academically, social, emotionally, and also the making up for lost time, you know, anything that happened or didn't happen in the spring for students. I think I'm guessing that educators are already sort of figuring that out and working on that now. There are some longer term implications for what that looks like. And I think they could probably address some of this with us, but I also think we may have folks come back a little bit later in the process, maybe in November or December, to talk about what does this look like in the summer, planning for the summer, you know. I think they may be able to address some of it, but I also think that some of it, they may have some initial thoughts and we may be encouraging them to think about the solutions to those things, but they may not have firm answers. I will try to make this a succinct list of things we'd like to talk about and give them a time frame and you know, let them bring to us what they have and what they're ready to talk about with us. And I think the biggest piece is sort of explaining their model and, you know, the timelines and the course changes, special concerns for 9th grade, college prep, the rigor of science labs, art, you know, any sort of one of those remote pieces, and then the needs that they have for staffing, for budgets, now and or planning for the future. And their plans, you know, as part of that pedagogical model of like how they're operating things right now on a high level. Some of this is high level, some of this is really in the details, and I don't want to get too into the weeds, but I think if they could give us some big idea things on this. Is there anything that I didn't just say that you want me to make sure goes into this email? Okay, how about Remote Learning Academy? What are the things that folks want to make sure we talk about? Is there anything different from the list that we just had that you think is specific to the Remote Academy? Clearly, things that are specific to the high school, I'm not going to put on here for them. The pedagogical model, you know, how are student needs being met? You know, staffing, budget implications. Anything else? You know, how students are doing with it. And I think to me, that's like an engagement question. Like, are students participating? Are they coming to remote classes? Are they engaging in the lessons? How do they appear? You know, body language and just participation levels is part of that. How are students doing? I think that would be interesting to know. Are there any other things specific to the Remote Learning Academy that you want to hear about?
I think there's a set of technology issues. I think there's also a set of, I think there's also a set of questions around all remote for the youngest grades. I mean, we've spent a lot of time talking about the importance of in-person education for K through 2 or K through 3. And so the fact that these are all remote all year for that age group, I think just understanding specifically what does it in their minds or in best practices, what does it take to be successful with that age group in an all remote environment. I think there's also a set of questions around, in an all remote environment, what are the community building opportunities? What are the, are there in-person opportunities outside and distance? I mean, there's kind of, you know, what does physical education look like? How do you deal with isolation? How do we support the parents? I mean, there's sort of a set of questions that are going to come into play specifically in an all remote environment. You know, bandwidth issues. We know that families are facing bandwidth issues. I mean, if they're off, you know, if our student's down for the day, like, then what? Like, do families know what to do? Do they have a plan for what to work on during that day and whatnot? So I think I would just sort of think through some of those things and see if we can kind of, because I think that's another place where we can really be helpful in terms of probing for additional supports needed for families and teachers, obviously.
Does anyone else want to add to that? Okay. Is there, I mean, we could make a list of what we want to talk about for hybrid. It's just that it's a couple of weeks from now, and I'm not sure if we'll have other information and our questions might be different, but I'm going to make it so we're talking about what is this pedagogical model. Oh, the other thing, I'm sorry, that I wanted to add about the RLA is, and Susan, maybe you could give me some sort of direction here on this, because I do believe that one of the ad hoc task force on remote learning subcommittees was talking specifically about the amount of time young children should be spending on screens and things like that. And so I just sort of want to, the number of hours of screen, like synchronous versus asynchronous. And I do think that's part of the pedagogical model, but I do want to highlight that as a piece that we'd like to talk about. Is there a group from the ad hoc is it one or two that was dealing with that, Susan, or both?
They did, but I think that kind of falls under, how do you do K through 3 in an all remote environment? Because obviously the more time you have a child sitting in front of a screen, the quote unquote easier that is on a parent, although that isn't very easy, versus time when they are not on a screen. That means the parent needs, there's childcare implications for that. So I think it's not like one or the other is obviously easier for parents. They're just different hard. So that is something that has come up in the panels. If we want them to investigate it, I'm sure they'd be excited to do so. There are some experts on that. So I think we can sort of get better mileage out of the expertise there. Same thing on the professional development side, just like what are the capacities needed for educators in this model. I think there's a lot more capability on those panels than we are currently taking advantage of.
I'm going to add PD needs to both the high school and the RLA just to sort of get as part of their needs and their budgeting and things like that. Yep.
Just to, because I'm just remembering in the minutes, actually, which I did get a chance to scan very quickly, there was the issue that Michelle, actually, you were at that meeting and presented the PD and the principal's budgets. And I think we need to, not now, but at some point before the budget gets finalized, circle back to that and understand it better and understand where we want to go with that, because it was a significant amount of money. Not huge, but significant. So sorry, I just wanted to, because I had read that and it just sort of, you were talking about PD. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think for the hybrid model, we're talking about what is this pedagogical model? And I think one of those is sort of like, what is the model and why we are picking this model? Why do we think that this is the best way to go forward? I think another piece is, so one is the what, and the other piece is the when, and how is it going to be implemented? There are some staffing and budgetary implications there. Other things people want to add? I'm writing, so anybody want to sort of, what are other things about the hybrid model that you want to know? I mean, those right there, the what, the when, the how rather, and the staffing, that's a pretty big chunk. Like, that would be a lot of information that we don't currently have right now. So what other things do we want to add? Maybe we come back to this at the very end of the October 6th meeting, and if people have questions and we say, where are we now? What are some other questions? Or maybe we could also send questions if maybe Robin sends out an email, a week before the meeting and says, what are some questions you have? And then that could be forwarded to the district level staff as well. So we can make sure, I really want to maximize their time and hours. Does that make sense to folks? Okay. Any other new business? Okay, I think we have plenty. Oh, go ahead, Helen. Do you have new business? I can't hear you. Sorry. Are you sure? We have like 7 more minutes, or maybe 15. My clock.
Okay, I can't help it. One of the things that we had talked about was getting a holistic look about the supports needed for families in our Steps to Success programs or other low-income families in this time frame. So we've talked in a sort of an isolated way about meals. We've talked about technology. We've talked about a couple other things. Sometimes we talk about transportation. Sometimes we talk about childcare. But I think it would be really helpful to have a discussion with some combination of Steps, either Shelma or Jeanette, and Mindy Paolo, or both, or Mindy Paolo, Keith Lozama, about our various populations, not all of whom are low income, but EL population, that co-population aren't necessarily low income, but STEPS obviously is. and sort of what their needs are and what kind, because some of them we can meet, but many of them are, it's more of the district partnering with other people to be able to meet those needs, partnering with housing, partnering with, you know, RCN, partnering with food pantry, partnering with mental health center. Like there are a lot of things that we can do in terms of connections, even where we can't put additional dollars to something or give visibility to a scholarship fund or what have you. So I guess I would say with the Brookline Community Foundation, so I think just really understanding what they need and how this is going for them, what they need, and what are we doing, what can we do. There's just being creative, I think is an important conversation to have. So we talked about doing this in the minutes that didn't quite get, that piece didn't quite get into the minutes from the last time, so I'll add that, Robin, or you can, but that's the one thing that we have not really taken like a holistic look at in this time.
Is that something that lives in curriculum or whole school committee?
I mean, normally the detailed, I mean, curriculum is basically, you know, it ends up being, Barbara, what, anything that isn't finance or policy or you know, government relations or negotiations or capital, yeah. It sort of lands in curriculum. And all the strategic sort of pedagogical stuff lands in curriculum. So if you want to turf it out, feel free to convince the chair and vice chair that they need to do it somewhere else. I think there is, whoever takes it, there is a first pass subcommittee conversation where we're just kind of sitting around and we're talking before you get to a Thursday night at the table, so to speak, not that we have a table, with 200 people watching on YouTube. I think there's a different vibe to the conversation. So I do think that there's something there that we can, and then bring an update, kind of to Barbara's point earlier, kind of bring a substantive update, but it can be like 2 slides with like, here are the needs, here's what we're doing, here are our partnerships, here's what's next. You can kind of, and
What's
then,
going well?
yeah, here's what's going well.
So I'm
I-
happy to, go ahead, Helen.
I was at a STEPS board meeting just last week, and they are doing a lot of work. Their financial situation is much more stable and better. And, you know, so, but I think there were some issues, and certainly that this would be a good forum for it. So whenever, I think probably in November.
That's what I was going to say. Like, I'm happy for us to discuss that here. I think it's really important conversation. I'm just looking at our current schedule of things that we just prioritize. I think that conversation would be our November conversation, which allows them to sort of figure out what are maybe some succinct needs that we might be able to help them with and what's going well. So I don't think that's entirely, you know, everything is better sooner rather than later, but I don't know that we could do it before November.
And
Helen?
one of the things we may ask, we certainly want numbers from the English language learners about numbers for this year. I don't think we've gotten that from Meg or anywhere else. And seeing how the staffing versus the numbers add up, because our numbers have been going up significantly in English language learners. I know it's come down, just to get a sense of that.
So we're looking at inviting Mindy, Keith, several people from STEPS. Who else?
Shoma.
Shoma, yeah, Shoma and Jeanette, probably.
Yep. Anybody else? Are there any other important groups of folks that we need to be thinking of that I am?
I mean, it would be great to, there have been a couple of, I mean, the other question that I have is how do we more consistently get representation from STEPS parents in some of these committees, given that they are unpaid, given that they're often during work hours. Like, there are a lot of barriers to participation and to getting feedback. I mean, even with like the remote task force, we have 2 representatives, and it's just challenging for them to get to the Friday morning meetings from 9:30 to 11. And so I end up making a bunch of one-off phone calls to people, but yeah, it would just be important to figure out how to get that voice in. And I guess, but sort of by extension, you know, this is one, Jennifer, where panel 1 is really interested in this one specifically. So if they end up having this some version of this meeting before we do, then that would be great to kind of get them as well. Kanan or someone else, you know, from Aspire Institute, or anyone else from panel 1, if they've got ideas and recommendations for us.
Susan, just so you know, STEPS is having a difficult time just getting a parent to be on their board. So, you know, it's to have them then do something that's one step removed is even harder, I think.
Right.
Okay, that's great. I have all those notes down as well, so we'll aim for that for November, and we'll see what other things come our way. I will reach out to folks and sort of give them a heads up about this, and Robin and I will coordinate getting these on the books, so to speak, and with an agenda. Any other new business before we close? It is just about 5:30. We are on time. Are we good? Okay. All right, we're
Good
adjourned.
meeting, Jennifer. First time ever. Great.
Thank you, Helen. I
You
appreciate
kept
it.
us on.
Thank you. And you know, it was great. Barbara and I were able to chat on the phone previously, so I was able to sort of get some feedback from her as well, and also Helen. So thank you so much for your support. All right, awesome. We're done. We're good.